Hey guys, it's Christy and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me. Today we're finally going to be reviewing the new mini Starlette palette from Natasha, Denona. So before we get into it, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel before you leave. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy, and let's get into it. Alright, so I feel like I am the very last person to get this one in, but I've been so excited for this palette since it leaked, I guess, maybe a month or so ago. This is just definitely the type of color story that I would go for. So first of all, what's new with this is there's actually a window in the box. We haven't seen that before. Typically they're all enclosed. So I do kind of like that. I think that will be exceptionally convenient when you're in Sephora shopping. I believe this retails for $28 US. This has a 24-month shelf life and is made in Italy. The thing that is interesting about this palette is there are no new shades to this one. I'm very excited for this color story. I find it interesting that she chose to release the palette where there's nothing new. So this is what it looks like. I'm also really excited to be seeing this one in person. I feel like every single photo I saw of this palette had a different look to it, and I wasn't really sure exactly what we were going to get. So I am really excited about this. It does have a little kind of rose gold backing, which I think is really pretty. And the color story is really, really beautiful. This is definitely something I am going to really love and enjoy. So really quickly, let's look at the swatches. First, we have Nude Mauve, which is in the Lila palette and the Retro palette. We have Galaxia, which is in Mini Retro and the Star palette. Then we have Vega, which is in the Star palette, Rhea, which is in the Star palette, and Per Se, which is in the Lila palette. So I never owned the Star palette or the Lila palette, which is why I don't mind that this is all repeats. I should mention the formulas in here. There are 3 mattes. There is 1 metallic and 1 chroma crystal. So if you're familiar with the Mini Retro, the chroma crystal is that really extra sparkly shade, which I do love. It is my favorite from that palette. So I think what we're going to do, I'm just going to put this on the eyes. The look that I'm going to get probably is not going to be unique, but we'll create a look. I'll share my thoughts, and then I have a bunch of comparisons. I have some both high-end and affordable palettes to compare this to. So let's just get into putting this on the eyes. I am going to start with Vega, of course, and this is just going to be my crease shade. Initially looking at this palette, I think it looks a little more muted than some others. I think that it might be a little bit more of a boring color story. But then again, this is exactly what I said about the Mini Biba, and that ended up being my favorite palette of all time, essentially. I also read, I believe on her website, that she thinks this palette would be good to be paired with the Mini Star, which is one of the only ones that I don't have. So if you have both of them, let me know if they work well together. This shade is actually turning out to be very, very light. Looking at the palette as a whole, we do get a little bit of depth, but I really don't feel like there's a ton, so I'm kind of wondering how it's going to work on deeper skin tones. So if you pick this up and you are on the deeper side, let us know in the comments how this worked for you. I mean, I am very, very fair, so this color story is going to work for me, but I wonder how this is going to perform on deeper skin tones. Alright, from there I'm going to take Nude Mauve. This is a shade I already know I like from the Retro palette. The Retro palette being one of my favorites from Natasha. And I did just switch from my BK Beauty A503 to my 202. The 202 is my absolute favorite blending brush. I will say I do think this is a really nice soft color story, which is typically my preference. Sometimes I do like to play around with bolder looks, bolder shades, but for the most part, my makeup style is definitely very soft, very wearable, never anything too crazy. I think a lot of that comes from just having fair skin. I'm noticing it's looking a little bit patchy on this side, and I'm not 100% sure what's going on right there. I think something went weird with my primer in that area, but I can't be sure. That's gonna irritate me, but I have no idea what's going on there. Okay, we're gonna kind of not pay attention to this eye as much. It's driving me crazy though. All right, for the sake of trying as many as I can, I'm gonna go in to Per Se, just to deepen that outer corner. I really don't need to be honest. I don't need to, but I think I will just to kind of see how much depth I can get to. It looks nice like that though. Okay, now going in with Rhea, and I'm going to put this one kind of in the center. I'm willing to bet that this is pretty much the same look everybody else has created with this palette as well. But I do think there's only so much that can be done with a 5 pan. I'm surprised I'm getting the metallics to apply with a brush so nicely. That doesn't usually happen for me. I'm just going in with that outer corner shade a little bit, just to kind of blend those together a little bit better. Then I'm gonna grab Galaxia on a finger. This is my absolute favorite in the mini retro. I just think it's the prettiest. It's not quite as beautiful as Blaze Nude from Mini Biba, but it's close. That is quite pretty. I think I might want more of Rhea though. This would be a really pretty palette to do like a halo eye with as well. I think that would be beautiful. I love a good halo eye. I'm gonna bring this in more. Okay, I'm thinking I shouldn't have brought Rhea in. I should have just left it with Galaxia all over the lid, but that's okay. So I'll pop off camera, I will pop on some mascara, and then I'll be right back to share my thoughts and comparisons. All right, so here is the final look. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I think it's quite nice. I don't think you're gonna get a ton of range with this palette, but I do think it's really pretty. This is definitely a color story I'm gonna get a lot of use out of. Like I mentioned, I love a good soft color story. I love a good champagne shade. I love a lot of this palette, so I think I will definitely be getting a lot of use out of it. I love this color story. That being said, it's definitely not a unique color story. If you have any of the other palettes from Natasha, the Lila or the Star palette, I would absolutely pass on this. But if you're looking for a similar vibe, I wanted to share some comparisons. So I did look at Pillow Talk against this one, and side by side, we're getting some similarities. There's definitely some similar things to come out of this. I do think you could come up with a similar look. So definitely a very similar vibe, definitely that very wearable, peachy, lighter tone color story, definitely very similar. I think if you have Pillow Talk, you're gonna get a very similar vibe. Next is a ColourPop palette, and I have around 20 or so ColourPop palettes, which is a lot, but it's not as extensive as some. So the palette in my collection where I was able to essentially get a very similar vibe is the It's a Mood palette. So this one is obviously very large compared to this one, but you can see side by side where you might be able to dupe this vibe with this palette. Again, I'll pop up swatches. I was able to get something very, very similar. It's not going to be shade for shade matches, but I think you're definitely going to be able to get a very, very similar effect. And these two, this retails for only a couple dollars more than this one, and you get a ton more in this. So it's really up to you, but if you already have this one, dig it out, maybe see if you can create a very similar vibe. The next palette I wanted to look at is the Sunset Stripped from Too Faced. This is a newer palette to my collection, but I think you can also get a very, very similar vibe from this one. I will pop up swatches of the shades that I think kind of match up, and you'll see I was able to get a very similar effect. I will say the metallics in the Too Faced seem to be a little bit more impactful than the Natasha. Not the one that I put beside Galaxia, but the one I put beside Rhea. The shade from the Too Faced was so much more impactful. So I wanted to mention that Natasha's mattes are definitely better and superior, but you're going to be able to get a very, very similar vibe. And this palette is also phenomenal. So if you already have this one, you can probably create something very similar. I also wanted to look at the Pat McGrath Iconic Infatuation from her Valentine's Day collection. So looking at these side by side, they definitely have similarities. In the swatches, the one shade in Pat McGrath did not want to swatch for me, but I do think you can create something pretty similar if you have this one as well. But the palette that created the absolute most similarities is a $5 eyeshadow palette. This is from Oma by Sharon C. This is the Eye Service eyeshadow quad in Dreaming. So this one, looking at them side by side, you will see that the deepest shade in the Oma palette is more of a warm brown, whereas these are definitely a little bit more cool browns. So if that's a really important difference, then of course go with the Natasha. But if that doesn't bother you, then you're going to be able to create something very, very similar from this $5 eyeshadow palette. I will pop up photos so you can see what I'm talking about. And the similarities are definitely there. I have raved about this quad before. I think this is absolutely fabulous. This one, in my opinion, is almost a perfect dupe for the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk Dreams quad, which is why I didn't compare that quad to the palette, because I think this is almost better. The metallics in here are so much more shiny and sparkly, and it's $5. So I think this is fabulous. I was going to compare the mini Starlette as well to some of my other Natasha palettes, but honestly I don't see much value in that. Looking at the retro, there really is only Nude Mauve. Mini retro, there's Galaxia. I don't have Star or Lila. But the Natasha palette that I do think has enough similarities is the My Dream palette. Looking at them side by side, you can definitely create a very similar vibe, in my opinion. Those are my thoughts. I think if you have any of these other palettes I've mentioned, I think you're going to be able to get something very, very similar to this color story. I think this color story is absolutely stunning. I really do. I love it. I was really looking forward to picking this one up. That being said, I do tend to collect her mini palettes. So for me, I definitely wanted this. Like I said, I collect them. I wanted to review it. If you're kind of on the fence and you have any of these other palettes, I think you can safely skip this one. Again, the Pillow Talk quad from Charlotte Tilbury. It's not shade for shade dupes, but it's a very similar vibe. And then all of these other palettes that I've mentioned will also give you a similar vibe. This color story is definitely not unique, but it is super beautiful. It's a color story I'm going to really enjoy. I think if you are rather fair like I am, I think you would really enjoy this as well, because I think for the most part you're always going to end up getting a bit of a softer look. So I do think it's really pretty for that. If you're absolutely dying to pick this one up, I don't think you'd be disappointed. It's beautiful and the quality is fabulous. If you're on the fence or you're not sure, I would just take a look through your collection. If you have any of the others I've mentioned, dig them out, play with them. I think you'll be able to get something very similar, and maybe I'm going to get a lot of use out of this. This is definitely a color story that I will reach for a ton, and I'm excited to add it to my collection of minis. However, I don't think this is her most exciting launch, just given that none of these shades are new. So for that reason, I think it's absolutely beautiful. If you've been dying to get it, grab it. I don't think you'll be disappointed, but otherwise, I don't think you need it. But it is very, very pretty, and the quality is her usual excellent quality. But that is it for me today. Let me know down below if you're planning to pick this one up. Let me know if you already did. What are your thoughts? I hope the comparisons were helpful as well. But thank you so, so much for watching. If you're new here, I hope you'll consider subscribing before you go. I do upload at least 3 new videos every single week. Thank you again so very much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!